Hello and welcome to MEELive. Join us as together we take another look at the stories that are shaping our world.
We are broadcasting live to YouTube from Middle East Eye's headquarters here in London.
I'm Mohammed Hassan.
And I'm Matilda Mallinson. Today is Thursday, the 29th of May.
Matilda, what's happening on the show today?
Today we are looking at a new report which alleges EU complicity in human rights atrocities against migrants on our external border with Africa. Now, it comes at the same time as coordinated protests happening in Tunisia and Libya by refugees, asylum seekers and migrants who say that they are being treated with racism and abuse by EU-funded state actors.
Now, it's an interesting time to be having this conversation, right? It's been 10 years since the height of the migrant crisis in Europe.
Yeah, that is true. 2015, this was the sort of peak year where we started to see refugee migration flows into Europe across the Mediterranean and the Aegean seas. And of course, the death of, 2-year-old, or was it 4-year-old, a small boy, Alan Kurdi.
3-year-old, yeah.
3-year-old, who, whose photo really brought immigration to the political mainstream, and it stayed in the limelight. But while it's a very, very hot domestic political topic, few people know what is actually happening just across the border in the name of European border security. So we'll be looking at that. We'll be hearing from some of the protesters, from someone who's done this journey, and we'll have a live interview with someone from SOS Humanity, which is the group behind this research.
Fantastic.
Then, Mohammed, I think you're bringing us something a little bit different today.
Yeah, we're changing pace a little bit. And now when I talk about the idea of resistance and comedy, now, do those two things in your mind feel like they marry each other very naturally?
I wish they did more. I wish
Yeah.
resistance could be a bit more fun sometimes.
Well, we're going to be hosting a Palestinian Irish comedian by the name of Sami Borda, who is trying to do exactly just that. Of course, he's Palestinian, he's Irish, he's grown up with a history of resistance in his veins, and he's incredibly funny, and he has a show that is on right now in London. He's going to be here to talk about that show and talk about what it means to try and marry those two ideas together.
And you have an exciting announcement with that, don't you?
Yes, so this is going to be a first for MEELive. We actually have a giveaway. We have 2 tickets to his show that is taking place on Saturday. If you are interested, if you are in London and want to go see some comedy, then stick around and we'll tell you exactly how to get your hands on those.
First, though, let's take a look at the headlines.
At least 2 Palestinians are dead and multiple injured after hundreds stormed an UNRWA aid warehouse in Gaza amid a worsening man-made famine. Eyewitness videos show crowds of Palestinians breaking into a UN warehouse in central Gaza on Wednesday, searching for food supplies. The UNRWA Public Information Office in Gaza blamed the incident on the ongoing Israeli blockade on the entry of food and supplies into the Strip. It comes just a day after a stampede in Rafah, where Israeli soldiers fired at Palestinians who were made to line up between metal frames as they waited for food during a distribution by the controversial company Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The private organization backed by the US and Israel was set up after Israel banned UNRWA and other humanitarian groups from distributing aid. Philippe Lazzarini, the head of UNRWA, described the distribution as, quote, chaotic, undignified, and unsafe, and said the GHF's model does not align with core humanitarian principles. Under mounting international pressure, Israel has begun to partially lift a blockade on food, clean water, and medicine, which has been in place for 11 weeks. On Wednesday, the Palestinian ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, delivered an emotional address to the Security Council, urging the international community to take immediate action.
Bracing their motionless bodies,
The earpieces are on.
caressing their hair, talking to them, apologizing to them.
Wow.
This is unbearable. How could anyone tolerate this horror? Excuse me, Mr. President. I have grandchildren.
The detention of British Egyptian activist Alaa Abd al-Fattah has been declared illegal under international law by a UN panel of human rights experts who have called for his immediate release. Abdel Fattah, who played a key role in the 2011 Egyptian revolution, has since spent the best part of a decade behind bars under Egypt's military government. In September, he completed a 5-year sentence for, quote, spreading false news. But authorities refused to release him, saying the 2 years he spent in pre-trial detention didn't count. The UN group has given Egypt's government 6 months to release Abdel Fattah, compensate him for his unlawful detention, and amend laws around pre-trial detention. Yesterday, Middle East Eye spoke to Alaa's mother, Layla Swift, in London. She has been on hunger strike for over 240 days to protest for her son's release. She says the UN decision undermines the government's case for keeping her son detained.
It will certainly put pressure on the government whether it will actually result in his release is another question. It will certainly put pressure on them, and because one of their arguments is always no, he hasn't finished his sentence, and he you know, did a criminal offense, and you can't release him just because he's binational or because his mother is making a fuss. So this will at least make this argument completely invalid.
Human rights groups estimate more than 65,000 political prisoners are held in Egypt by Egypt's government, close to half of whom are in pre-trial detention.
The Trump administration says it will aggressively revoke the visas of Chinese students studying in the United States. In a statement on Wednesday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the ban would apply to those, quote, with connections to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in sensitive fields. However, it remains unclear how many of the 280,000 Chinese students currently in the United States will be affected. The announcement comes amid escalating tensions between Beijing and Washington, fueled by an ongoing tariff war. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning condemned the move.
美方以意识形态和国家安全为借口，无理取消中国留学生签证，严重损害中国留学生的合法权益，干扰两国正常人文交流。中方对此坚决反对，已向美方提出交涉。
Meanwhile, the U.S. has also ordered a pause on processing new student visas as the White House expands its social media vetting of all visa applications. The government has attempted to stop Harvard University from enrolling international students, leaving many concerned about their safety and their scholarships.
Every student's welcome here.
Harvard's voice is loud and clear.
Harvard's voice is loud and clear.
Every student's welcome here.
Every student's welcome here. Moms in class today.
Every student, let them stay.
Every student, let them stay.
All right. Of retaliation, afraid of deportation. Obviously, 3 domestic students will stand in their place and understand why it is so important to stand united and to stand organized against the Trump administration today.
Following a lawsuit filed by Harvard, a judge has temporarily halted the ban, with a hearing set to take place today.
Misogynistic influencer Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan have been charged in the UK for multiple offences, including rape and human trafficking. The Crown Prosecution Service confirmed for the first time on Monday the total list of 21 charges behind an extradition warrant to bring the accused back from Romania. The 2 British Americans face separate charges there for organised crime, trafficking of minors, money laundering and more. They have previously denied all charges and vowed to clear their names in both Romania and the UK. The brothers' extradition has been approved by a Bucharest court after criminal proceedings in Romania conclude. It follows their return on Friday from a promotional tour in the US, nearly a month after their travel ban was unexpectedly lifted by authorities. The pair announced that they flew on a private jet to Florida, where they quickly became subject to a new criminal investigation involving the US National Center on Sexual Exploitation. Next up, we look at trafficking and human rights abuses on the EU's external border, as a new report reveals the devastating consequences of immigration policies growing more and more popular across the West.
Narosi, kilometer 21. The Ghana national Narosi today can do today. This thing I have got to do. This thing I put today.
Captured on camera here, the Tunisian National Guard attacked a refugee camp near the country's coast earlier today. Residents report goods being stolen and shelters set ablaze by an armed force the EU is accused of funding. Brussels denies human rights violations are occurring due to migration agreements signed with Tunisia and Libya, which see the EU pay hundreds of millions of euros to authorities preventing Mediterranean crossings. But new research presents damning evidence of atrocities arising from these partnerships. Welcome to MEELive's Deep Dive, where we dive into a story shaking up the world. Refugees and migrants across Libya and Tunisia are coordinating protests against what they call inhumane and racist treatments at the hands of EU-funded authorities. Protesters in Sfax, the site of today's attack, have spoken about innocent migrants dying in detention centres, others being driven to the desert and abandoned, and others being sold into modern slavery. Women and children among the protesters called on international actors to help them find their missing husbands and fathers.
Because a lot of us here, our husbands are missing, these children, their fathers are missing, we don't even know their whereabouts. The few ones that are able to call us, they let us know that they are in Libya prison and some are in Algeria desert. They can't even find their way here. We can't hear from majority of them, which is why we're going to plead to the IOM, the UN, the authorities to please stop selling us to the Libyans, to please stop taking us to Algeria desert.
Protesters also say, rather than deterring them from crossing into Europe, their treatment at the hands of these North African states is pressing them to continue their journeys.
The real problem that we wanted here is that when we have come here, we have nothing. First, we are suffering a lot, and the second, we have an issue. Our issue is that we would like to get out from this country. We have not any place to live.
It raises questions about the efficacy of EU border policy and also the humanity. This week marks 10 years since refugee sea crossings into Europe surged and operations by SOS Humanity, an NGO in the Mediterranean, began. These threw immigration into the political limelight. Now, a decade on, SOS Humanity has released a report detailing EU complicity in atrocities committed by third-party authorities. These include the Libyan and Tunisian coast guards. It also traces EU taxpayer funds falling into the hands of the very traffickers these policies claim to combat. The report, titled Borders of Inhumanity, is based on the testimonies of 64 survivors from 15 countries who were rescued by the Humanity ship over a 3-year period. MEE has footage from one interview with a 28-year-old man from South Sudan, featured in the report under the pseudonym Stephen. Stephen came to Libya after a factory injury in Egypt made it impossible for him to work, and he had no access there to medical treatment. He recounts his and his fellow travellers' experiences reaching Europe, first at the mercy of gangs in the Sahara Desert who hold migrants hostage and extort their families, and then at the hands of EU-funded Libyan authorities, where he recounts detention, starvation, forced labour, and beatings.
I'm a refugee, I'm an asylum seeker. This one is very painful story for my brothers who are willing to come to Libya. This one is very hard because you may face many things. Your life in desert, it's not safe. If they never kill you, they can even make all your family poor. They can catch you, tell you call your family. If you not call your family, they will just cut some of your body, they will burn you, so that, and video you and send the video to your family. So your family, if they don't have anything, they will sell the land, the house, so they can save your life. We need only safety. In Libya, there is no safety. There is no safety for any migrant or anyone. I go to Tripoli, the capital of Libya. I register for UNHCR asylum. So that was on October. The police, they come, they attack the UNHCR asylum that time. So they catch many people. You have UNHCR document, you don't have document. They catch all the foreigners, they carry them to prison. So that time I spent like 4 months in prison. This prison is called Enzara. I entered the sea in the 2 of June 2022. They catch me. From that day, I stay inside the prison, Melita, 3 months. The situation was very bad inside Melita prison. There is no water and also there is no feeding. So life is very worse. Everything is difficult. So I face the difficulty inside that prison because I didn't have anyone with me in Libya. It was me only struggling, hustling, all these things. I work in the barrack, soldiers barrack. I work for 8 months. These 8 months, no rest, no Friday, no Sunday. From morning, sometimes from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. working. With this hand, I carry block, I carry cement, and after that we clean the house, the rooms for the soldiers. We clean toilet rooms, we sweep the ground, doing all the work, washing even their cars. There's everything inside the barrack. We are the machine. They use us like this. So if you mistake, you speak wrong or you do something, they go beat you. Everything is like you are not human. I lose my dream, I lose hope, I lose everything. But last night you give me another life, you give me another hope. So I will thank humanity, one rescue crew. I'm a refugee, I'm an asylum seeker. This one is very painful story for my brothers who are willing to come to Libya. This one is very hard because you may face many things. Your life in that it is not safe. If they never kill you, they can even make all your family poor. They can catch you, tell you call your family. If you not call your family, they will just cut some of your body, they will burn you, so that, and video you and send the video to your family. So your family, if they don't have anything, they will sell the land, the house, so they can save your life. We need only safety. In Libya, there is no safety. There is no safety for any migrant or anyone. I go to Tripoli, the capital of Libya. I register for UNHCR asylum. So that was on October. The police, they come, they attack the UNHCR asylum that time. So they catch many people. You have UNHCR document, you don't have document. They catch all the foreigners, they carry them to prison. So that time I spent like 4 months in prison. This prison is called Enzara. I entered the sea in the 2 of June 2022. They catch me. From that day, I stay inside the prison, Melita, 3 months. The situation was very bad inside Melita prison. There is no water and also there is no feeding. So life is very worse. Everything is difficult. So I face the difficulty inside that prison because I didn't have anyone with me in Libya. It was me only struggling, hustling, all these things. I work in the barrack, soldiers barrack. I work for 8 months. These 8 months, no rest, no Friday, no Sunday. from morning, sometimes from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. working. With this hand, I carry block, I carry cement, and after that we clean the house, the rooms for the soldiers. We clean toilet rooms, we sweep the ground, doing all the work, washing even their cars. There's everything inside the barrack. We are the machine. They use us like this. So if you mistake, you speak wrong or you do something, they go beat you. Everything is like you are not human. I lose my dream, I lose hope, I lose everything. But last night you give me another life, you give me another hope. So I will thank humanity, one rescue crew.
Stephen's despair ended, he says, when he was rescued in the Mediterranean by SOS Humanity, the rescue group behind today's research. A warning, the next interview may involve reference to sexual violence, which makes up part of the findings. Here to discuss those findings is SOS Humanity's Sasha Okenden. Hello, Sasha.
Hi, good afternoon.
The report says that it brings to light the consequences of the European Union's externalization policies. Can you just explain what is meant by externalization and which specific policies you're talking about?
Absolutely. So externalization refers to the outsourcing of border controls and international protection to so-called third countries. In other words, rather than dealing with people as they arrive in Europe, it means pushing back that responsibility onto countries outside the European Union. So in this case, Libya and Tunisia. So we've looked at the EU funding over the last 10 years, which is about 242 million euros just on so-called border control or border protection. What that means is the EU is doing everything it can to either prevent people leaving those countries or to force them back to those countries in order to avoid having to fulfill their responsibilities under international law. And those responsibilities, by the way, they stem from the Geneva Convention of 1951. They're a product of the Second World War. But despite this fact, the EU is putting money and resources into funding so-called Libyan Coast Guard and Tunisian Coast Guard. They've supported the creation of rescue coordination centres and search and rescue zones. None of these have anything to do with search and rescue. They don't have anything to do with saving lives. They're about forcing people back into the situations from which they've fled, despite the fact that that's a violation of international law. So the reason we wanted to write this report, Borders of Inhumanity, which I've got here, was to try and bring the EU to account and to try and shed light on the fact that EU taxpayer money is being used to not only violate international law, but in some cases actually that money is ending up financing indirectly the very smugglers that Europe is allegedly trying to combat.
Now, these externalization policies you describe appear not just to be increasingly relied on by the EU, but other global north wealthy countries that are contracting poorer states to prevent asylum seekers from reaching their borders. A high-profile example, of course, is the US, which has begun deporting so-called illegal migrants to an El Salvadorian prison without due process. They're also currently seeking to deport men from Vietnam, Cuba, and Mexico to South Sudan, a country on the brink of civil war itself. And earlier this month, the UK government announced negotiations with third-party countries about receiving rejected UK asylum seekers. Policymakers say that the goal of this is to deter people from taking dangerous journeys and stop illegal trafficking. Based on your evidence, are these policies working?
Well, I think the thing that's very clear is it's not about departures, it's about arrivals. So what the EU is trying to do is prevent people arriving. And there's some evidence that has worked. The number of people arriving in Italy, for example, has reduced slightly. But the question for us is, at what cost? I mean, nearly 2,000 people last year died crossing the central Mediterranean. It is, according to the International Organization for Migration, IOM, it's the deadliest refugee route in the world. So what the EU is doing is not preventing people. Is preventing people arriving, and the ways in which that happens can be, for example, a high number of deaths at sea. It can be people being forced back into a cycle of violence in Libya and Tunisia. So the question for us as SOS Humanity is, what is the cost of preventing people arriving? At the moment, it seems like the price that the European Union is willing to pay is actually deaths at sea. We've seen more and more people dying, more children dying as well. And even those who haven't lost their lives in the Mediterranean have been forced back to North Africa, to Libya and Tunisia. Excuse me. And the other thing I would say maybe about the rhetoric of combating traffickers and smugglers, Italy, for example, has come out very strongly and said that the Meloni government is strongly opposed to human trafficking and people smuggling. There's a case mentioned in our report earlier this year where a human trafficker who's wanted for crimes against humanity, there's an ICC warrant out against him called Osama Njim. He was able to travel freely to Italy to watch a football match. He was briefly detained and then released by the Italian government, and he was actually put on a plane back to Libya. So that is the kind of treatment that people traffickers and people smugglers get from European member states such as Libya. Some of these people are receiving money from migrants and refugees with one hand to put them on boats, and they're receiving money from the European Union from the other hand to force them back. So it's a very profitable cycle, but it's ultimately a cycle that comes at the expense of those who are trying to flee from war, from persecution, from abject poverty, and it results, in many cases, ultimately in their death.
What are the worst offences that we've seen coming out of the EU's partnership with Libya and Tunisia, both within those countries and on the Mediterranean Sea itself?
So as you mentioned in our report, we look at the testimonies of 64 survivors, some of them extremely harrowing, I have to say. The types of offences that were reported ranged from discrimination, persecution in everyday life, through to violence of many kinds, including sexual violence, rape. Many people we spoke to were imprisoned, especially in Libya, in detention centres and extorted for money. What that means is they're repeatedly tortured, and their families are forced to give what little money they have. As mentioned in the testimony that you showed earlier, that there's also a growing trend of so-called desert dumping, which means that people, when they can't pay, are simply brought to the desert and left to die. That's something that we've had testimonies where people have seen that happen to other people. We've had all of these things witnessed firsthand. I myself was on board our rescue ship Humanity 1 a couple of years ago, so a few of these interviews I carried out myself. One story that stays in my mind particularly was a man who we gave the pseudonym of Dempsey to. He was a man from the Ivory Coast. He was a professional footballer. He moved to Tunisia and actually tried to create a life there. He wasn't intending to cross the Mediterranean. But the situation for people from sub-Saharan Africa and Tunisia had escalated so dramatically that one day he was out at football training, his wife was pregnant, and a group of men broke into their house, a group of strangers, and beat her. So that she was bleeding. She went to hospital, again, because of the discrimination against black migrants and refugees. They refused treatment, they refused support from the police. The police actually chased them to the coast. So they were left with no alternative but to find a boat and to cross the Mediterranean. And their story was absolutely harrowing. I mean, I wasn't able to actually speak to his wife, his pregnant wife. She'd just taken a pregnancy test that came back negative. In other words, she lost her baby due to the beating that she'd received in Tunisia. And this is the kind of situation that people are being forced back into, totally arbitrary violence, resulting in traumatic loss of life or harrowing situations.
How were researchers
I'm sorry,
able
you also
to...
asked a question about the...
Sorry, I just wanted to establish quickly how you're able to prove that there is a connection between EU funding, EU taxpayer money, and these human rights abuses. What is the proof?
Well, the proof on one level is no secret. I mean, the fact that the EU is funding the Tunisian Coast Guard, the so-called Libyan Coast Guard, I mean, this is publicly available information. The evidence that we're seeing, both first-hand testimonies from survivors and from other reports from organizations working in the region underscores what kind of organizations these are. These organizations, in some cases, actually have an overlap with the militias and with the people traffickers in Libya and Tunisia. The UN fact-finding mission of 2023 actually exposed this fact. This is relatively well known. And aside from, as I mentioned before, the phenomenon of illegally forcing people back to Tunisia and to Libya, in itself a violation of the non-refoulement principle in international law. Some of the testimonies that we heard from survivors actually underscore the fact that these are essentially violent militias. We had testimonies where people, some of whom I spoke to, they reported being beaten, being sexually harassed, actually on the sea in the central Mediterranean by these so-called coast guards. We've seen them firing live ammunition near rescue boats. We've seen them firing shots into the water. There was one case I mentioned in this report where a lady called Fida was crossing for the 8th time. She tried 8 times to flee across the Mediterranean with several children, one of them disabled. Not only was her disabled child beaten by the so-called Libyan Coast Guard, but she also watched people being left to drown. So these are reports that we're hearing not in an isolated way. These are the norm. The reports, the 64 testimonies in this report, are themselves valuable evidence to show that this is something that's happening systemically. People are being beaten. There's cases where boats are rammed by the Tunisian Coast Guard, and as I say, people are literally being left to drown by an organization which is supposedly there to carry out search and rescue. So I don't think there's any secret that this is happening. It's just a case of the European Union and European governments preferring to finance these organizations rather than take responsibility for human rights and international protection.
Sasha, SOS Humanity has been operating for 10 years now in the Mediterranean. In that time, we have seen refugee migration increasingly criminalized across Europe. We've also seen humanitarian groups increasingly criminalized. Can you outline what that looks like and how that affects rescue efforts at sea?
As you mentioned, we've been operating for 10 years now. This report marks 10 years of our work. In that time, we rescued nearly 39,000 people from distress at sea. But what we've also been able to see in this time is the increasing criminalization of search and rescue organizations such as SOS Humanity. That comes in a number of forms. For example, the Italian government has a practice of assigning extremely distant ports for the disembarkation of survivors. So what that means is we'll carry out a rescue and then have to sail thousands of kilometers, sometimes 4 or 5 days, with people on board in sometimes catastrophic medical conditions before we're allowed to disembark them. That's also a way of keeping the rescue ships out of the search and rescue zone. So that's one way in which our work is restricted. There's also increasingly been a campaign, especially by the Italian government, to detain rescue ships under spurious pretenses. There have been fines, there have been attempts to stop the rescue ships from leaving. Despite the fact that every legal attempt, every accusation made against organizations like SOS Humanity has been shown to be entirely hollow. There's never been any suggestion of any malpractice or of breaking any law. But these ships are often preemptively detained by the government, and in that time, obviously, more and more people lose their lives. That more people drown in the Mediterranean, and I think that's symptomatic of a broader trend across Europe, where we see on land and on sea rescues of many kinds being criminalized, sometimes in an attempt to scare people away, in an attempt to stop people carrying out the work that they do. We see it as our duty to carry out search and rescue in the Mediterranean. There's no one else doing it. There's no state authority carrying out search and rescue. So we're not being scared away by these efforts, but at the same time, it does make our work increasingly hard carrying out as we do rescue operations in the central Mediterranean.
Nevertheless, something undoubtedly does need to be done about the deadly and unregulated migration flows that are currently happening. If it's not contracting third-party states to prevent these journeys from happening in the first place, what alternative solutions do groups like yours propose to mitigate the crisis?
Well, as you say, externalization for us, it sounds like a kind of a bureaucratic term. What it means in practice is simply sacrificing more lives in order to avoid processing more asylum claims, in order to avoid more people arriving in Europe. So that for us is not a solution. We've seen the effects of that in this report, Borders of Inhumanity. We've seen that externalization simply means more deaths, either in the central Mediterranean or in Libya and Tunisia. You mentioned unregulated. I think it's important to note that in the 10 years that we've been operating in the central Mediterranean, we and other organizations have always campaigned for an EU-funded, EU-coordinated search and rescue mission. That briefly existed in 2013, 2014. The Italian government carried out a limited search and rescue operation called Mare Nostrum, which proves that it can be done. It's purely a question of political will. So part of the solution from our point of view is for the EU to establish a search and rescue mission in the central Mediterranean and actually to carry out this work that is currently falling onto the shoulders of small NGOs like SOS Humanity. That for us is a crucial part of the puzzle that needs to be solved. At the same time, we also call on the European Union and its member states to end all cooperation with Libya and with Tunisia and with authorities in those countries. That leads to the human rights violations that we've seen. That leads to people being forced back into a cycle of violence from which, unfortunately, many don't escape. And we're talking here. It's maybe important to say about the numbers that we have and the people that we have talked to. The actual number of people who've drowned in the Mediterranean is likely far higher. The number of people who've been subject to these human rights violations in Libya and Tunisia is also far higher because there's nobody there to witness them. So we see it as part of our duty. These interviews are carried out on board the Humanity One in the middle of rescue operations. But we see it as part of our duty to testify about what's happening because in some cases these people are describing events that actually nobody else has seen and nobody's going to know about unless we try and amplify them. So that was the aim of our report, and we hope that in the long term it will lead to some of these changes to a search and rescue program in the Mediterranean and to an end to this kind of cooperation which sees EU taxpayer money being used to essentially fund and finance human rights violations and people trafficking.
Sasha Okinden, SOS Humanity, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
In October, the EU held a migration summit in which they agreed to expand these externalizing migration policies, including for the first time funding offshore deportation centres, which they called return hubs. Earlier this month, Keir Starmer repeated that term as a policy the UK is also working towards. President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, presented the policy as a bid to tackle human trafficking.
Today, we see that all those who have no right to stay in the European Union, only 20% of those who have a return decision really are returned to their countries of origin. So we're working to improve this operational work, and we will soon present a new proposal, legislative proposal for that. We had one from 2018, but it is stuck in Parliament and Council. So we will come with a new proposal for returns. We also need to continue, and we've discussed that here in this room a lot, to tackle the smuggling and the human trafficking. Here the legislation is 20 years old. So we have now a new proposal on the table, and I hope we can advance swiftly on that one. Today, we see that all those who have no right to stay in the European Union, only 20% of those who have...
Welcome back to MEELive. Now for something completely different. Today we have a very special segment for you. We are talking about art, resistance and comedy. And to tell us more, we're joined in the studio by the very talented Irish-Palestinian comedian, actor and playwright Sami Abu Warda. Now, Sami is a man of a million faces. His debut live show, Bedu, was ranked by The Guardian as one of the top 10 shows of 2022. That same year, he created and starred in the Channel 4 comedy series, The Sheikh.
Sheikh Ahmed Al-Kabir, the 867th richest person in the world. I have come to invest my money in this poor-deprived island of Great Britain. Follow me as I explore the middle western country of Great Britain and find out just how far money can get you in fashion, football,
Awooga! Awooga!
death, food, and love. Always protected by my bodyguard and trained killer, Jimmy. Let me help you. Help me get richer. Sheikh Ahmed Al-Kabir, the 867th richest person in the world. I have come to invest my money in this poor...
His new hour of comedy, Peace de Resistance, is playing now at the Shubak Festival of Contemporary Arab Art that is taking over London this month. It examines what art and resistance can look like in dark times and asks the question, can resistance actually be funny? That is the poster of the show, which I think is hilarious. And guess what? We have 2 tickets to give away to that show, so stay tuned at the end of this conversation to find out how you can get your hands on them. Sami Abu Warda, welcome to Middle East Eye Live.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure.
First of all, I just cannot get enough of this poster.
Thank you.
Every time I look at it, which has been like dozens of times now, I can't help but laugh.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to shoot. Actually, it was not the initial concept. The initial concept was a lot simpler, but I brought some extra costume just to have some fun. And my photographer, a very good friend of mine, actually, he's a filmmaker, Vahid Hakimzadeh, Iranian filmmaker. He shot that photo, and
you just have a Yasser Arafat outfit.
Well, I just you need to have one handy at home. If you don't have your Yasser Arafat outfit, then what are you doing in life? So I was just like, let's try this, and we took some photos, and he took one look at it. He said, dude, that's the show image. So yeah, it was one of those things where you just kind of think, let's try something, and it turns out pretty well.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, I don't mean to be that kind of Arab and ask you about your background and your degree, but someone told me that you're a doctor.
Yeah, I have a medical degree, and I made the move a while back into well, initially comedy, but now I make theatre. Really, it's theatre that is funny. I put on like full theatre shows. So this is one of those. So my first show was sort of theatrical comedy, and so is this one. So it's not necessarily an hour of stand up, because these days, when you say I do comedy, people, which is to be expected, people think that it's all stand up.
They want setup and some punchlines, and
there are lots of setups and punchlines, and there are lots of jokes. Don't get me wrong, but it's definitely it's very theatrical. It's theatre.
And when you see you perform live, which I have got an opportunity to a couple of times, it's hard to imagine you really doing anything else. So I'm really curious.
Thank you.
How did you start your journey in medicine, and then how did you pivot into comedy?
Yeah, I got into medical school, as you say, like a good Arab boy.
Of course.
And I mean, the truth is, I've never spoken about this to the public before, but I really wanted to go to drama school while I was at med school, and it was the 2008 financial crisis, and my plan was to just sort of pay my way through drama school, working at bars and stuff, and then obviously during the 2008 financial crisis, it was 100-1 for a bar job. It was hell, and so I was like, well, my backup option isn't so bad. I was like, okay, let's just finish this through.
I'll be a doctor.
I did that.
Fine.
Yeah, I did that. I worked for a bit. I went to École Philippe Gaulier in France, and that really helped me, fund myself through that and everything. So, and ever since then, I got back to London. I've just been doing basically my comedy and making theatre and making stuff, which is really that's what I want to do.
Now, your show really proposes this question about how can resistance be funny?
Yeah.
We live in a very dark time. It is overwhelming. Everybody feels it. You just have to turn on your phone in the morning and you're inundated with the reality of the world that we're currently living in.
Yeah.
So you, as a practitioner, as a comedian, how do you feed into that? How do you take that and then turn it into something that people can laugh at and enjoy themselves in?
With great difficulty. It's been very, very difficult. I started out as I would say I did character clowning. I'm obsessed with physical comedy, with clowning, and with very silly things. And then obviously, since the genocide has started in Gaza, it was an extreme challenge just to get onto the stage and to sort of put on a kind of a happy face. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And I know a lot of my colleagues, friends, contemporary artists felt and still feel the same way. It's very difficult. I moved into doing more stand-up after that because I felt that that was a more appropriate tool set to use for talking about politics. And so I started
because you can say
doing,
the things directly, right?
you can say things, yeah. You can, yeah, basically, yeah. You can kind of structure things in a way to make more of a point. You know, like Frankie Boyle does that. And it's hard to. It was a very challenging shift initially, because I wasn't used to speaking about politics on stage, and I just gigged a lot doing that and really kind of found my feet doing that. And then I had sort of this concept for this theatre show. So I've been using a lot of the tools I've gained doing that at the same time as storytelling. And then I've also included my bread and butter and my love, which is physical comedy really and clowning. And that's all in this show. And this show is really the culmination of a lot of the difficult feelings that we've all been having, To your second sort of point, which is, can comedy, can theatre, can this be a part of the resistance, or can you perform resistance through it? Yes, I think it depends what you're saying. It depends a lot on what you're saying, and it depends what the function of it is. A good friend of mine, Sara Al-Agha, last year she came to one of my work in progress shows, and she said, "This is great because it's a place for people to come together, and it's a place for people to have as community. So we all come to an event." On that basic level, yes. I am a big supporter of direct action as well, and I do talk about direct action towards the end of my show. And I think giving a platform to organizations that engage in direct action, like Palestine Action, and having that represented on stage in a show that people are coming to see, I haven't seen that very much. Spreading the word and just saying, "Hey, look, if we want to stop the bombs being made that are currently killing Palestinians, we can physically do something about that." Just standing on stage and saying that is even now, 18 plus months in to this, even now for a lot of people in Britain, I think that's still a contentious thing, which is crazy, like saying, let's stop an arms factory from making bombs that kill people is a contentious. So, you don't see a lot of people platforming that point of view. You have amazing people like Kneecap who have been so far, like, just really, just saying everything that needs to be said. But apart from them and the odd, A-list Hollywood actor, Liam Cunningham and a few others, it's still been a lot of silence, I think. It's still been a lot of silence. And so the very simple act of standing on your platform and using your work to amplify people who are engaging, I think it makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I appreciate about your work is that, especially more recently, that it's not just the humor that comes through, but you don't really filter some of the anger too. Yeah. And sometimes you really feel that coming through. Yeah. And I wonder, as a physical practitioner, with that as your background, is there a physicality? Does that allow you to be able to channel some of that energy?
Yeah, I've in the show itself, I've made use of storytelling in order to channel that, because when you go on stage, nobody wants to see someone shouting and screaming and getting angry, directly at the world and directly at the audience. So I've found a way to channel that through storytelling, through characters, through all that kind of stuff. There are certain historical figures who are not very popular amongst some Arabs, particularly in Algeria. My show touches on French-occupied Algeria quite heavily. And you can really there are very easy, good targets there that haven't really been struck in Britain, at least, because Algeria is not a big part of the conversation in Britain. Yeah. And you can really have fun sort of attacking your targets. If it's the French who are occupying Algeria, or US soldiers or British soldiers, you can have a lot of fun attacking those targets with comedy. And that's where you can really channel the anger into something that isn't just demonstrating anger.
Yeah, and speaking of channeling that anger, you are a product of Palestinian and Irish roots.
Yeah.
Both histories that are deeply rooted in resistance and a history of resistance. And tell me about that. How does that inform who you are?
Well, my father was a member of the Palestinian resistance. He was a member of the PLO. He took part in the 1967 war, and his life was resistance. He really, his whole life was resistance, and that influenced me from day one. From day one, it's. Just like many Arabs, I have been directly influenced by war, and I was displaced in the Kuwait invasion, like nearly everybody who lived in Kuwait at the time was, and the thing that has really crystallized for me recently is when you're in a position of any kind of privilege, how quickly that can be taken away from you when somebody in power decides that you're no longer worthy of it. Whether you're a Palestinian in Kuwait, or whether you're a Palestinian in Palestine, or whether you're an ethnic minority in Britain, or if you are queer or disabled, or when somebody in power decides that we don't like that group, what they're doing to the trans community right now, the Labour government is unconscionable. It's absolutely unconscionable. And because one day, on the flip of a coin, they decided that it would be practical for them to attack the trans community, and so when you realize that, it really kind of it really gets you into a position where it's like, well, what am I actually living my life for? How can I engage living my life in a truthful way where I construct something that makes the world a better place? Because the sad truth is, right now, for a lot of us, the systems that exist are not benefiting people as they should, and they are actually, many of those systems are engaging in some kind of oppression. Whether it's an organization that doesn't speak out about the genocide that Britain is taking part in, that's sort of complicity through silence, many large organizations, or what the BBC is doing, which is direct complicity in genocide, in my opinion. So to answer your question in a very roundabout way, having that experience myself of displacement due to war, and my father's experience of land theft, displacement, my grandparents from Ireland, their experience of displacement in the 1920s, they escaped. They left Ireland like many Irish people have for a very long time, and this multiple generational displacement, because in my case, the Brits decided that actually those people, no, they're not going to get it. They're not going to, in my case, and by the Brits, I mean the British government and British imperialism, not individual British people. And when you have multiple levels of multi-generational disenfranchisement, you have no choice but to think about what your place in the world is and what resistance means to you. Because if you don't, it eats away at you, because you're living a false life. And so that's where things are right now. And it's not just me, it's many of us. It really is many of us. And it's not just Palestinians, it's not just Arabs. It's working class white British people. They are getting absolutely screwed by the Labour Party right now, as they were by the Conservatives. I'm not allowed to say screwed. Can I say screwed?
You can say screwed.
Okay,
That's
thank
fine.
you. Okay. And so this is, the working class knows no borders, So it's very much a case of like, guys, we need to all decide what kind of a world we want to live in together. This is not good enough. This is not working. What now? Keir Starmer is just a face. It's just a different face every few years. The face of Keir Starmer, that person, the system they're upholding is very toxic, and we need to start thinking of how to address that and how to bring a new system in, and that's the root of resistance. And you can do that in so many ways.
That's so fascinating to hear you put it that way. I want to ask you, because you're part of the Pal Art Collective,
correct,
which has put on a festival, which is part of Shabak, which is your show is a part of. And recently, you and 500 art practitioners in the UK signed a letter in support of Ahmed Masoud, who's the founder of the Pal Art Collective. Can you tell me what that letter was about and
Yes.
what happened to his family?
Ahmed Masoud I have so much admiration and respect for Ahmed Masoud. Ahmed Masoud, for those who don't know, is a Palestinian playwright from Gaza who lost his brother in early 2024, an Israeli shot his brother in the street, and which led to his brother's death in Gaza. And I think it was either last week or the week before that, they then killed his nephew with a bomb. An Israeli killed his nephew. And he is a really important part of not just the Arab or Palestinian community. This is the point I'm trying to get across. It's all of us, theatre practitioners, creators, comedians. And this is the boundary that needs to be broken right now. Is it doesn't matter what your job is, it doesn't matter what career you have, what business you're in, the equivalent person in Gaza, in Sudan, in the Congo right now is having everything taken away from them. And so are you going to stand in solidarity with humanity? And so the project, the letter, with Ahmed Masoud is a letter that we are signing and circulating in order to recognize what has happened and stand in solidarity with him. And it's also a very important letter for the industry to try and shake the industry into moving and into a position where we can start getting institutions to speak up against what's happening in Palestine right now. And again, Sudan and the Congo. And these places are sort of the hotbeds of the imperialist project in a way. And we need to start having that conversation because frankly, until now, nearly every single theatre has been utterly silent in the UK. Nearly every single one. There have been a few standout ones that have either put on work or made statements, but the vast majority have been utterly silent. And my question to them is, what use is art? And how can you call yourself artists if you do not stand against this criminal regime that we have in the UK? How can you stand and take money and not speak out against what they're doing to other artists? You know, even if you just want to speak about actors, producers, writers, comedians, I don't know. What's the point of you? What to the theaters? What's the point of you? You know, say something, do something. Yeah, as you can tell, there's the fire.
The energy's there. The energy's there. Yeah, and so you're bringing a lot of the energy into your show. Peace de Resistance.
Yeah.
What do you hope people take away from it when they leave the theater at the end?
I want people to feel energized. I want people to feel hopeful. I want people to go away thinking, how am I going to stand up and take part in the end of in bringing about an end of the genocide, bringing about a ceasefire, but almost equally, if not more importantly, this is not just about the genocide in Gaza. This is about the structures that are in place that allow people on the turn of a coin to decide we are going to massacre 100,000 people. Those people should not have that power. And we collectively, especially in the UK, need to come together and decide how we are going to move forward to decide that no more Tony Blairs, no more Alistair Campbells, no more. No more Keir Starmers, no more 1 million Iraqis dead, no more 200,000 Palestinians dead, no more. And what do we do so that our children and children's children don't have to do the job that we are doing now?
Quite the sales pitch.
Thank you.
Tell us, where can we see the show?
So the show is now on for one more night.
Yes.
At Teatro Technis in Camden. It's at 5 p.m. I think there's only a handful of tickets left.
Saturday, right?
Saturday, yes, sorry, Saturday. Yeah, thank you, right? Let me do that again. Saturday.
People are just going to show up tomorrow.
Tomorrow night.
Bang on the door.
Saturday, 5 p.m, Teatro Technis in Camden. There are only a few tickets left. I understand you're giving away a couple of tickets as part of
That's
this
right.
show.
We have 2 tickets to give away.
Yeah.
If you want to get your hands on them, then you can email us, MEELive@middleeastai.org. Tell us why you want to go see the show. Tell us that you're in London, which is the most important part of it. And we'll be giving away 2 tickets courtesy of the fantastic Sami Abu Warda. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And to play us out, we have a clip, really great clip from one of Sami's shows. Let's have a watch.
The New York Times yesterday, I believe, published an article where they described a Palestinian village as land long used by Palestinians. Yeah. It's not land long used by Palestinians, it's Palestine. It would be like calling the BBC office space long used by paedophiles. I actually don't mind calling it land long used by Palestinians, because the corollary of that is that Israel is land briefly occupied by fascists.
Sami Abu Warda there. It's a pleasure to have him here. And I mentioned the email that you should email. I think I got it slightly wrong. It's
Yeah, that's
MEE
normally
Live.
my job. So.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very fresh to this. MEELive@middleeasti.net.
.net.
Send us those emails. And of course, before we go, we want to hear your thoughts about this whole show, about the conversation we had with Sami, about the conversation we had with Sasha, about the migrant crisis. Please send us your thoughts. How can you do that?
Exactly. You can use the email that Mohammed so accurately just laid out for you, and also contact us on social media. The social media tag is @MiddleEastEye, and we're across all platforms. And the email, again, one more time, is MEELive@middleeasti.net.
Make sure you hit the notification bell so you know exactly when we're going live. It happens every Tuesday and every Thursday right here, 5 p.m. UK time, 12 p.m. New York time.
See you then.